So how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. It's a beautiful day, and I'm yeah, just working. It's been quite a work day, so I'm pretty, and it's quite hot outside.
Yeah,
It's
but
pretty
but
hot.
working is good, right? It's better than having like,
Working with
especially in this business, right? You never know how
That's
much
it
you work and when you work, right?
exactly. So whenever I work, I have to remind myself that it's good that I work, even though
Yeah,
it's sometimes pretty rough. But that's all I do.
right. Timo, seriously, thank you very much for your time today.
Of
Very
course,
excited, of
absolutely.
course, to talk about your movie, Jeepers Creepers. And I was
Mhm.
wondering, because the first movie came out like over 20 years ago, and I was wondering
Mhm.
because whenever you rewatch movies that you've seen, at a younger age, you might change your opinion about them, or you might discover something about them that wasn't clear to you back then. So I was wondering, what would you say, how much did your personal relationship with the franchise and the creature change or develop, between the time that you first saw the first one for the first time and the day you realized and knew that you were going to direct the next one yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. Uh, to me, the Creeper was it was one of the nicer horror creature films back in the days. Obviously, around that time or a little bit earlier, there was a lot of those films, but
Yeah.
Creeper always had a special side to it, which was this a little bit different approach, I would say, to the whole creature. So to me, yeah, I enjoyed that and I enjoyed watching it and all that. But when I eventually I was asked to do the Jeepers Creepers Reborn, the story goes so that I met this producer Jake Seal, and we were talking actually something about Iron Sky related stuff, like just discussing like this and that, and then we
Yeah.
were speaking with him and we were sort of hitting together with the over films, and then he was like, you know what, I have a film that I think you might want to read.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, what is it? And I can't tell you anything about it. It's a secret, but I'll send you the script at one point. And then he did send me the script, and I think it had some sort of a fake name, like script often have they're
Ah,
not, it's like a secret name. It was
yeah.
called something else. Can't remember
Yeah.
what. And I started to read it, but this is this is Jeepers Creepers, isn't it? And then I realized, oh my God, this is cheap. Are you serious? So I got really excited, of course, like because
Yeah.
it's a franchise that exists, and it's like a exciting franchise, and I love the creature. And I was like, but it's just funny to sort of start to read and bit by bit start to realize, holy shit, this is something that I'm really excited about. So
Right.
yeah, and then obviously, of course, my relationship with the creeper. I mean, I never really spent too much time thinking about what it is, what kind of laws there are in the world of Jeepers Creepers, like what kind of a creature it is. I just take it as a film. But when I obviously started to read the script, I started to research it and started to watch the movies with a completely different, perspective and sort of different eye. I started to gather information that just made it more and more, uh, you know, the creeper got closer and closer to me. I started to sort of
Yeah.
understand its psyche one way or another.
Right. And I can imagine because of course, obviously, as an audience member, you have the information that the director delivers. But of course, if you are the director, then eventually you even have to think about more than you actually show in the film, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to be quite versatile actually with the thing. It doesn't mean that even if you're not like the most hardcore fan that you
Mhm.
wouldn't be able to deal with it, because obviously you come as a filmmaker, you come as your own person and sort of your own things you will bring to the whole thing. So the idea was, and to me, the idea was always not to imitate, uh, not to imitate, but try to try to bring something that I enjoyed in the movies of the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, sort of that kind of creature movies, like trying to find that feeling that I had when I was watching those movies and try to bring that feeling from my own perspective to
Yeah.
the movie. And that was definitely kind of would call it kind of a challenge and the thing that drove me forward. But again, it was not. It was important for me to understand the creeper at least in my own world. Whether it's I didn't have a conversation with the creator of the creeper, like what he thought of it when all of that. My material was the movies, and then there's a graphic novel and stuff like that. So my material was those, but especially the movies were my material, and then I made my own deduction or my own sort of thing about it based on those, and then took it from there and created the world around that.
Right. And what about your general, you are a horror fan, so am I. And I don't know about your friends, but I realized that once my friends and I became adults, all the ones that watched horror movies with me started to lose interest in the genre, And then sometimes I realized maybe they were not really that much into the genre, but more into the idea of watching something that was forbidden for them at the time. And all of a sudden you grow up and then, it becomes legal for you to watch these movies and you are kind of losing interest. That's what I realized about my friends, and I was at least some of them. And I was wondering, what would you say is it that kept you a fan, of horror, even post-childhood and post-teenage years?
I think one of the reasons is that horror has always been a place where filmmakers get to do more and more sort of get horror has always been a place where great filmmakers gather around.
Yeah.
So even filmmakers that eventually might end up doing something else, many times the horror is the place where they may be either starting or sort of trying out their skills, or then they come to that and start to create something there. And what I like about horror is that it keeps on evolving with the time always. So it's not like a stagnant thing, but the audience requires horror to change, and the filmmakers are skilled filmmakers who are able to change with the times, with the audiences. And I think that's always been something that if you see a horror film from the 80s and from the 90s, they are completely different animals. If you see a 90s and 2000s horror, they're so different animals, but they are still, the very basis is there. The very space structure is the same, the heart and the reasons and everything. It may be sometimes that horror fashion is to be a bit more comedic. Sometimes it's a bit more action-based. Sometimes it's more psychological horrors. Like depends a little bit on the time, but still it always comes back to the same basic elements, and it's just, it remains interesting.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100% agree.
And another thing is, what I always think is horror. I mean, you can make horror with a hell of a lot of money. You can do $100 million horror film, but usually they are not very good. What I find it always interesting with horror is that any director that comes into horror usually comes with a small budget. So it's more about the filmmaker themselves and the script itself than necessarily the money that you pour into it. And that, I think, is has always been very inspiring.
Absolutely.
Because then you really see what the filmmaker can and cannot do.
Absolutely. And it kind of reminds me of, that even the big names like Ridley Scott, for example, who also started, of course, smaller. And it kind of reminds me how inventive even they had to be, at the beginning of their careers. For example, when it comes down to Alien, they had to ask questions: how do we actually get this alien made with this little money that we have? And obviously technology was a whole different thing back then. And so you have to be inventive with a smaller budget. But as we've seen, and how many times, and it's been proven so many times, that for the audience, it doesn't really matter if the movie was low budget or not, because all they want is an effective movie. So you have Paranormal Activity, you have movies that were made for $10,000, and then you have movies that were made for $50 million. However, that doesn't mean that the one that cost you $50 million is going to have more viewers than the other one.
No, it definitely does not. I mean, obviously, the bigger the movie, more marketing money you're going to put into it, which obviously means that the more people are going to see. But also, there's another thing about horror, which is always interesting, is the word of mouth, which is stronger than in any other film genre. And the
Yeah,
word of mouth is so important, and you
yeah,
can't really fake the word of mouth. I mean, you can create very nice trailers, nice posters. You can do expensive campaigns for
yeah.
movies, and people go see them or not. But word of mouth is if the film works, it works. If it doesn't work, word of mouth. And much of horror is based on word of mouth. And if it's good, then you got a winning ticket.
Exactly. Yes. So, Jeepers Creepers is not, the first sequel you've made. You're already familiar with it because you've also made the Iron Sky at the Coming Race. And I was wondering, what would you say is more tricky, doing a follow-up to a movie that you directed yourself, or doing a follow-up to a franchise that someone else created?
You know what? I think both are very, very complicated things.
Hmm.
It's not. It is not. When I did Iron Sky: The Coming Race, it was not like I can't. It's not like starting from the scratch. When you start from the scratch, you have the whole world in your hands. But when you start from something, whether it's created by you or by somebody else, it definitely is uh, is a challenge. Now, I think there is something about working on an existing franchise when you come in as a new guy. Is it will have its challenges, and will be a lot of people are going to be questioning what you're going to do and all that. Uh, but it doesn't really. But then the only thing you can do is do your best and sort
Right.
of your own big. You can only do your own vision. It doesn't matter. Like the thing is, like, while I do love fans and I do love fandoms, filmmakers' job is to do a film that is their own looking film, or sort of acts in their way, and
Yeah, yeah,
then like make that as good as possible, with the intricacies that you have in yourself. So in that sense, it's both are very hard, because then again, if it's your created thing, you create something for one kind of audience, but if you come back to it 10 years later or whatever, it's completely new audience again. So you never know how it's going to go. That's the thing, is like you never just
right.
know how these things are going to go. uh, so yeah, it's always tricky. It's always a trick. It's always a trick.
And speaking about tricky stuff, I was wondering, um, because sometimes the more movies a franchise has, the more you can look back and ask yourself, was that really the right decision? Especially, for example, with Halloween, they had, like deleted everything that came after the first one for this new trilogy that they have made. And I was wondering if it ever was um, a bigger discussion, behind the scenes, what exactly from the previous movies will be canon, and what maybe won't be that relevant for your movie.
Well, funnily enough, in Jeepers Creepers Reborn, we kind of have a blanket answer to the whole thing. And without telling too much what
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is, there
sure.
is a blanket, yeah, there is an answer to the whole thing, which is sort of like the film itself is aware of its own existence, so to say. And
Mhm.
that was something that allowed us to sort of do what the producers wanted to do in the beginning. Is like they wanted to give a rebirth to the franchise. They wanted to they wanted to make, really do Jeepers Creepers Reborn, which in many levels is actually aware of its own position, its
Mhm.
own situation, and its own, element as a movie. So in that way, definitely there are things that we respect from the original films,
Mhm.
and then there are elements that we also respect from the original myth that the whole Jeepers Creepers was born from.
Yeah.
So there is a certain set of events that took place in the United States, which obviously have nothing to do with the creeper as a demon or anything like that. But there was similar kind of sequence which then inspired Jeepers Creepers movie, and then that kind of elements. So looking back, I wanted to go all the way back, and I wanted to really start looking at from which inspired the Jeepers Creepers, and then I wanted to go sort of forward and think about Jeepers Creepers sort of fandom it has created and how that could inspire this movie. That kind of things. So it was quite a, I would say, complex thing, but it was something that we thought of quite a lot, and then at the same time we didn't let that dictate too much of what we wanted to do, because there was kind of a blanket answer to the whole question.
Right, right. And one person that is obviously very fascinated by the creature and the creeper is your leading character, Chase.
Yes.
And so he's so amazed by it that he wants the myth, the urban legend to be true. And I was wondering if that is something like, if you share this with him in a way, do you remember like an urban legend from your childhood or your teenage years you really wanted to be real?
Well, I mean, if you go to all urban legends, there's always, this funny thing is that there's always this little hope. This I want to believe with everything, because it's like that would expand your world so much. What if there was something like this? What if there was so I understand where that kind of thinking comes from. And from my side, it was obviously I was kind of I was I loved my sci-fi films, and sort of wanted to believe that that's the way we're going, and that that there will be this and that and all of those. So as a fan, it's an interesting thing to, and even with the horror franchise, to think that what if it exists, what if it's real, because
Yeah,
what it would represent if it was real. Like, there is a difference between a fantasy movie and a crime movie, because obviously
right.
if this was real, but then this would be a crime movie. We're following a serial killer who's killing all these people. But now there is somebody who has these supernatural powers, to, you know, and that kind of thinking is something that somehow makes you want to believe that what if it was true, and how you would react in that situation, and that kind of things. It's a nice mind game, which I think is exciting, and that's one of the things about fandom, is that it's really, it puts the imagination flowing, and really questioning, like, what if this was true? And I don't know, it was interesting when I did Iron Sky, Nazis in the movie. Always the question was, what if it was true? What if it were Nazis in the movie?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
would they look? How would they look like? How would be the technology? How would be this that? Kind of, I approach the same with the Creeper. It's like, what if the Creeper was true? What if it was true even in a world where the Creeper movies have been made? What
Yeah.
would the actual, what would the Creeper which inspired these movies be like? And that kind of
Right.
what is something that I find fun in my life to question, and have thoughts about.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, the way how Chase reacts, to the creeper when he finds out that it is all true.
Yeah.
Of course, he's quite shocked, and his dream of wanting it to be real kind of turns into a nightmare that night.
Well,
And
he, but here we go. It's like, if you think about it, like, if you want something to be real, and then you actually, it is real, and this guy is now, trying to kill his girlfriend,
yeah,
it's suddenly it's not anymore fun at all.
no, no,
It's no more fun and games. This is the real shit.
yeah,
And that's also the reality of so many of these kind of conspiracy theories or legends. Like, if they really were true, it wouldn't be such a nice thing in the end. But it's a nice safe thought experiment in the movie theater. That, what if it was true? But then if it really was true, oh shit. And again, I'm sorry, I'm going back to Iron Sky, but I had that sort of little bit of that experience when I did Iron Sky, and we were sort of imagining how it would be if, like, the United States would be like run by almost like Nazis and fascists and everything.
yeah,
And then it happened almost like with Trump. And I was like, this isn't fun anymore. It was fun
yeah.
when I made a movie out of it. But now it's, no, now it's all real. I mean, now the people are, I mean, now it's turning into crazy.
It
And so,
changed how you think about it and everything.
my God, yeah. So anyway, it's a, you know, be careful what you wish for. You might just get it.
Right. But speaking of, that his dream, Chase's dream, turned from a dream to a nightmare. I was wondering because I know that filmmaking can be very, very, very challenging, which is something that a lot of people don't know. I was wondering if you remember like a specific moment from your career, you kind of felt like that your dream of being a storyteller kind of turned into a little nightmare because of whatever
I
reason.
do, I do remember a lot of that, and I do remember it through my career a few times. I think first time uh, was again with Iron Sky. We had just came up with the idea of Iron
Mhm.
Sky, and we went to Cannes Film Festival for the first time to finance the movie. So we wanted to
Yeah.
present the movies to the film financiers, and we thought that we had the best movie idea in the world, and we had. But when we realized that people were all caring, they didn't give a fuck about anything else but the money it's gonna make. Like nobody cared about the movie as a content. They only cared what are the money possibilities. And it
Yeah,
was such a
yeah.
big letdown. And I remember we came back from there. Again, this was the first time we went again. We came back from there. We were like, we're never gonna make this. This is a wrong career choice. This is horrible. This is very depressing. But
Hmm.
then next year we went back, and then year after that, and we started to understand that it's actually they care about the content. It's just the distribution. It's sort of the thinking pattern is a little different than what you as a creative filmmaker are used to when you start talking with the distributors. But actually, we all want the same thing. We want to have a good movie that actually excites people. So, but in the beginning, that was very hard to sort of get that done. And then the other one was I also remember always when Sky came out and it was very nicely received. But then there were also reviews that were not, they just didn't get the joke at all. They're like, this is the
Mm,
worst thing in
yeah,
the world.
yeah,
And I was like, that was the first time I really got that kind of like, holy shit, like people can see it so differently. And how can you ever make a good movie if there's always, another half of the people so it was all of these things have always been like a little, but then you get back up, you realize, that was
yeah,
one person's opinion, for example, or whatever. Uh, the point is not that. The point is that you keep on making the movies, keep on telling the stories, and keep on believing in your own idea, on vision, on thing that you do, and then whether people are like it or not, it's actually irrelevant. The point is that you just keep on believing what you do and becoming better and better at your job, and that's inspiring. So the older and the more films I make and sort of more experience I have, uh, the more I start to understand the basic intricacies of this. But at the same time, there are always moments during the filmmaking when you're just ready to quit,
yeah.
to either too depressed or too, something is just too hard. But in the end, it hopefully finds, you always get back up on the horse. I mean,
Right, right. I mean, the great thing
well,
about you is that you actually completed movies, because there are a lot of filmmakers who quit before the movie is complete.
it's true, and I know a lot of filmmakers who keep on talking about their first movie,
Mhm.
and then 10 years later they're still talking about their first movie because
Yeah.
they kind of they're waiting for somebody to come in and give them money then to do it. No, it's
Mm,
not the way. If you don't want to do a movie, you got to do the movie, and
mhm.
then then talk, because before that
That's the
it's just
thing.
like,
No one's waiting for you, right? You have to make sure
no,
that they
there's
are
enough
there.
of people. Yeah, there's enough of filmmakers out there. If you want to make a movie, you have to just jump in and do that, and then then you can talk about it. But you
Right,
gotta make it first.
right. Timo, I have one last question to you, because it came to mind because you guys worked on this movie during the pandemic, and I was,
Yes.
I was wondering, because the creeper comes back every 23 years. So, in your opinion, what would you say? How would the creeper react and act if he would wake up in the middle of a pandemic, realizing that no one's outdoor?
Oh my God, I think that would be a big depression. He would be like, holy shit, what am I gonna do now? He would just be just driving with his car on empty roads and there'd be nobody to kill. I mean, that would be he would like, I'm not gonna wake up in the 23 years again. So
That's the
Creeper needs the victims. It needs to feed. And if there's nobody to
Yeah.
feed, he's in trouble.
Right, right. Seriously, Timo, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you.
For
Absolutely.
sharing your stories. Very insightful. Thank you very much for sharing all of that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this. It's very nice talking to you.
Thank you so much. Nice talking to you, and all the best with the movie.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank
All
you so
right.
much,
Cool.
Timo. See you
Okay.
soon.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.